Hello, and thank you for watching this review video on how to use the WG Preparedness Solutions combined hazard vulnerability and business impact analysis tool for healthcare emergency management planning and preparedness. I am William Gonzalez, President and CEO of WGPS, and it is a great privilege to speak with you today. Our innovative digital tool combines the hazard vulnerability analysis and business impact analysis to provide a holistic assessment of risk and vulnerabilities, enabling healthcare organizations to proactively plan for and mitigate potential hazards. Gone are the days of guesswork when it comes to hazard vulnerability. We provide healthcare emergency management specialists with the necessary tool to accurately identify hazards and continuity vulnerabilities. In this video, we will discuss the following: HVA BIA worksheets, HVA categories, BIA categories, add-in HVA and BIA data, and lastly, reviewing a dashboard for data analysis. Before we begin, let's add our healthcare organization's name to the dashboard. The HVA tool and BIA tool contains the following worksheets: the instructions, the dashboard, which collects and analyzes as well as display your aggregated data, the hazard vulnerability analysis section, the business impact analysis section, a list of HVA categories, as well as likelihood of occurrences, averages per category, BIA categories, as well as an information sheet about business process analysis, statistical formulas, and resources. Within the HVA tab, we're going to go over the following contents: the columns, the rows, as well as the data that each column in a row has within itself. First, going over the columns. It's broken out into the category, and if you hover over each cell, it will provide you with a list of values that gives a description of what that cell is supposed to contain. So we have categories, hazard event, previous occurrences, previous exposure period, exposure probability, predicted exposure period, average occurrence per sample exposure, which we'll explain later, the likelihood of occurrence score, the difference between this score and this score, and we'll talk about this later. This is a probability value. This is a whole number value correlated with the actual probability. The premise score, internal preparedness, external preparedness, life impact, business impact, and as well as the total calculated vulnerability. So I filled out some sample data, as well as, just keep in mind, the actual HVA BIA is going to be a whole lot larger than this. This has been truncated for training purposes, but we filled out sample data here because the results or aggregated data that is displayed on the dashboard will not be displayed unless all fields have been filled out and any unused rows are deleted or removed. So for timing purposes, we filled out this data just to keep the ball rolling, but we left the first row open so that we can work through this together. So if you put your cursor or cell over the category cell, each one of these cells provides a drop-down list of values. Within these lists of values, you're going to have each type of HVA category. To go over those categories, let's do a quick review. Technical hazards refer to the hazards that arise from the failure or malfunction of technical systems, equipment, or processes. These hazards are typically associated with industrial activities, infrastructure, and technological systems, and can have various impacts on human health, safety, and the environment. Natural hazards are events or phenomena that occur naturally in the environment and have the potential to cause harm, destruction, or loss of life. Human-caused hazards, also known as anthropogenic hazards, are hazards that arise as a result of human activity or actions. Unlike natural hazards, which occur naturally in the environment, human-caused hazards are driven by human behavior, technological systems, and social factors. Hazardous materials refers to the risks and dangers associated with substances or materials that have the potential to cause harm to human health, the environment, or property. These materials, often referred to as hazardous substances or chemicals, possess properties that make them potentially toxic, flammable, explosive, corrosive, or reactive under certain conditions. Emergent infectious disease refers to the risk posed by newly identified or re-emergent infectious disease that have the potential to cause significant health impact in human populations. These diseases are often categorized by their novelty, rapid spread, and ability to cause severe illnesses. So for the first row, we've already had the event of active shooter. So this category falls under a human-caused category. And again, all of these are going to be different based on your facilities or your organization's risk. But to run through this newly compiled HVA BIA tool, we're going to just go through the first one so that you can see how the fields are used and operated together. So we have our category selected. We have our hazard event selected. And this is a general text in which you can add anything. There's no list of values, pull down or drop down associated with hazard event. So you can add or create or delete as much or as well as you need to. Previous occurrences, what that represents is how many actual times that event has happened in the past. So depending on your organization, depending on your area, your geographical area, your zip code, your state, whatever you use to collect your data in terms of the range that you use, that's where you're going to place that item of previous occurrences. So this is fictional right now, but we are going to pretend within our area we have had 40 active shooter incidences as defined by mass casualty active shooter criterion. But we're going to say within our area that we're planning for vulnerability, we've had 40. The previous exposure period, what this represents is the time frame in which that 40 or whatever that previous occurrence number occurred in. 1825 or 1825 is days, or is 5 years represented in days. So for this sample data, we're going to say that we've had 40 occurrences of active shooters in the last 5 years. So we're going to put 1825 here. Once you place that value in there, the exposure probability is going to be automatically calculated. There's no need to update or change the cell. The predicted exposure period. So if you're planning for your HVA to support your activities or predict your probability of occurrence within next year, you would use 365. Additionally, if you wanted to plan or predict within the next 2 years, if you go to the list of values here, 365 is for the current year, 730 is for within 2 years. You can place 3 years, 4 years, whatever predicted exposure period you wanted to predict. Usually, most healthcare organizations, to include ones that I've worked for, we've only used the next year, supported by all of the years of data that we've collected. So for this instance, we're going to use 365. So we want to predict the likelihood of occurrence of an active shooter within the next year. Average occurrence per sample exposure. So if your population data is 5 years, your sample might be per year. This value can represent any number, and it represents the at most occurrences. So if I wanted to predict at most the probability of 2 active shooter events happening within the next 365 days, I would put 2 there. To start a baseline or to establish a baseline, we recommend using your average occurrences per sample exposure. So if you've had 40 over the last 5 years, whatever the average was per year, use that number as the baseline for your probability, your likelihood of occurrences. So we're going to say on average, we've unfortunately had 12. We've had 12 active shooter events per year. What that does is that calculates the likelihood of occurrence. So the likelihood of at most 12 active shooters happening within the next year is about 4.8% or 0.04817. Again, if you change this number, you wanted to predict at most 20, it would update the likelihood of occurrence in this cell here. You can keep doing this as many times as you want, and it will still update the likelihood of occurrence. So again, we're going to use our average because we want to establish a baseline. So we said our average was 12. That's going to be our likelihood of occurrence. Within the next cell, which is your Q1 score, if you hover over the cell, you're going to see a score correlated with p-values. So for this p-value, it's 0.04817, which is between the value of 5. So we're going to put 5. Now this is our quantitative rating. So we've taken everything that has occurred for this particular event and we've given it a quantitative value. This is not meant to change because it's actually what happened or actually what will be predicted. Within the next section of the HVA, this is where we're going to place our qualitative ratings. So if you see the top data here, your sky blue represents your quantitative rating. Everything on the right side of the dotted line, as well as under the dark blue, is going to be your qualitative rating. So what this represents is through your professional experience, through your knowledge of factors that may be outside of the predicted likelihood of occurrences, your professional opinion goes here in this premise score. So your premise is what you believe the actual risk might be. These list of values are a little bit different, so they don't correspond with 1 for low, 5 for high, just to make sure that the math adds up. Your score is going to correspond as this. So if you believe a active shooter of 12 is going to have more of a likelihood of occurrence that's higher than this number, you would give this value a 1. If you think it's slightly lower, 2. If you think it's extremely low, you would give it a 5. For us, we believe that the likelihood is going to be a little bit higher, whether we can support that by actual probability of occurrences or whether the qualitative behavioral analysis of our staff, as well as the population that we serve, believe that this threat is highly more likely to occur. So we're going to give this a value of 2. So in terms of how we're internally prepared, again, if you hover over each one of these cells, they will provide you with the number as well as the corresponding qualitative value for each number. So for our internal preparedness, we believe we're pretty prepared. So we're going to give this a 4. Externally, we're going to match that with a 4. Of course, if this event does occur, it's going to have a likelihood of impact in life, but exactly how much is going to be based on your qualitative opinion. So we've trained our staff, we've updated our security procedures, we've updated our security system, we've enhanced our ID delivery process. There's a lot that we've done in our healthcare facility to make sure we mitigate the loss of life in case this event does occur. So we're gonna rate this as a 3. The impact of business, we're also going to rate this as a 3 because this will definitely stop business. But just to keep it in the middle, we're going to make sure to give it a 3 for our facility. So with all of those qualitative factors inputted, your total vulnerability score within your hazard vulnerability analysis equates to 51%. And again, all of your qualitative values can change based on your current situation. Your quantitative is going to be based on what actually occurred as well as the information, whether it's good or bad information, you place into this data calculation. For everyone's awareness, the formula that is used to calculate the likelihood of occurrence is the Poisson distribution. And the Poisson distribution is a statistical formula used to model the number of events occurring within the given time period. So with this last row of information filled out, our hazard vulnerability analysis is actually complete. And all of our totals and aggregated averages can be viewed below. With this complete, we'll go to our business impact analysis. Under our business impact analysis, we'll go through these headers and columns. The first column is category, description, priority threat, threat risk score, and then you have a COOP plan and survey, which will be equivalent to your qualitative rating on your HVA. But you're going to identify whether it's incorporated into your current COOP plan, whether it's a part of your testing, training, and exercise schedule, your mitigation efforts or your level of mitigation, as well as the operational impact that this essential function will have on the organization. Once we place all of those values into this BIA or into this table, it will complete the continuity risk score. To save time, we've already previously identified some arduous data and we've placed them inside of here to, again, help facilitate the completion of this tool so that it can give you the values on the dashboard. So now that our HVA has been complete, we're going to identify a new essential function. So if you go to the list of values, it has all of these values here. And just to go over these quickly, your organizational functions refer to the essential activities and services that an organization must perform to maintain its crucial operations during and after a disruptive event. Essential functions refer to the critical activities and services that must be performed by an organization to ensure its continued operation during and after a disruptive event. These functions are vital to the organization to fulfill its mission, provide essential services, and meet the needs of its stakeholders. Essential functions are urgent, important, and cannot be delayed. Something no one else does can be qualified as an essential function. EFs are supported by essential support activities. There are many different levels of EFs within a hospital or a medical center. Here's an example of some. Emergency services, surgical services, diagnostic services, intensive care units or intensive care services, maternal and neonatal care, rehabilitation services, pharmacy, and there's many others that can be categorized as an essential function under a medical center and or healthcare. This is all going to be varied based on your organization. These are just some examples. For dependencies, dependencies refer to the reliance on one function, process, system, or organization on another to perform its activities or deliver its services. In other words, it is the recognition that certain functions or resources are necessary for the successful execution of other functions. Dependencies can be internal, within the same organization, or external, involving relationships with external entities such as suppliers, partners, or stakeholders. Here's an example. A dependency may exist between a hospital and the fuel oil company that provides fuel for its backup electricity generators. For interdependencies refer to the reciprocal relationships and intersections between multiple functions, processes, systems, or organizations that involve an understanding that disruptions or failures in one area can have cascading effects on other interconnected functions or entities. Interdependencies can be complex, involving multiple layers and relationships within an organization or across different organizations. Here's another example of an interdependency. An interdependency may exist between the community and a safety net hospital. So if your hospital is identified as a safety net hospital in which it must be there to provide essential medical services towards a not so much a particular community, but just the community in large, that relationship between the community and the identified safety net hospital can qualify as an interdependency. So if we was to identify on this list, well, let's say we're going to identify an input essential function. Whatever that input essential function, again, it can't be delayed. It has to happen, and it can't be done by anybody else. When we say input or output, it's what's given into the organization as opposed to what is delivered out of the organization. We're just going to put test message here just to facilitate training. Now, in terms of priority threat, whatever input essential function you identify, when you're talking about priority threats, and if you refer to this list of values, it's going to refer you to the threats identified or the threat categories identified within your HVA. So what you're identifying here is the priority threat that is going to most affect this categorical selection. So if I wanted to say our input essential function is food, nutrition, services delivery, whether I put that here under description or if I'm just saying it out loud, what's going to stop food, nutrition, services being delivered to the organization may be a natural threat, whether it's a storm, whether it's, if you're depending on what area, and whether it's an earthquake. Let's just say per my organization, per my geographical area, that food and nutrition service being delivered to the organization, to the hospital, to the medical center, is more likely to be disrupted by a natural threat. Again, if you have information, and this is just talking out loud, if you have information about labor actions associated with said food delivery services, maybe your priority threat might be a human-caused threat. But for this example, we're going to put our priority threat as a natural threat. What that does automatically is that selects and updates your average threat risk score for all of your collective identified natural threats. And remember, your natural threats can be floods, hurricanes, rainstorms, droughts, snow, snowfall, earthquakes, high winds, whatever you've identified within your geographical area for natural threats. But the average risk score for each one of those threats are going to be placed into the cell. So if we just show by example, we take these out, it removes them. Natural. I don't remember what we had here, but we'll just call this another technical. This is why it's important to complete your HVA before updating or updating your BIA, because all of the values that are collected and aggregated within your HVA are pulled over and connected into your BIA. So now that we've identified the natural threat, we have the risk score. Let's talk about our qualitative COOP planning methodologies. So within the COOP plan, have we created a COOP plan? Is it in our COOP plan? Let's just say for this scenario, no, it's not within our COOP plan. So we're going to give it a value of 0 per the list of values prompt that comes up. If it's not in our COOP plan, it's probably not in our exercise schedule. So we're going to give this a 0. Mitigation efforts. Let's say we're trying to build a plan. We're identifying alternative resources for food nutrition. We're looking at what our natural, because we've identified the natural hazards as a high priority threat for this food nutrition delivery service input essential function. Let's just say we're doing as much analyzing as we can to mitigate those threats. So we'll give this, we're getting started, but we're not where we need to be. So let's just give it a 2, because 2 corresponds with low. Now, in terms of our operational impact, if we don't get food delivered, whether it's outside the 96-hour window or as soon as possible, patient care is going to be drastically affected. So if we don't get this, it's definitely going to be high. So we're going to give this a 2. So based off the natural hazards, our description, it being a input essential function, our current continuity risk for this vulnerability is 7.78%. So we updated the description of our input essential function to represent as food delivery service, and you would place your specific vendor name here. So if we had to reevaluate this continuity risk because we've made improvements on our planning and preparedness on the organizational side of the house, we've created a coup plan. So now we've planned for this. So we'll give this a 1. And we've added this within our upcoming exercise schedule so that we can actually test the functionality of our coup process during a disruption. So we'll give this another 1. And let's just say our mitigation efforts have increased. So we still have some work to do, but we'll improve it to about a 3. That continuity risk score, there's always going to be a continuity risk because there is an identified hazardous risk as detailed on your HVA. So there's always going to be a proposed continuity risk, but it decreased. It went from 7.78 to 4.45. Some things to keep in mind. Once you're complete filling out your BIA, you may be left with some unused rows. You need to make sure that you remove and delete those rows so that the data can be properly aggregated and pulled under these summary cells. Additionally, the formula for your threat risk score is based on the values of the cell or the table within the HVA category worksheet, which is going to be locked. But Excel doesn't really play very well with this formula. So if you have to insert a new row, this formula may have the tendency to try to update. In order for this formula to work, any new cell, and we'll provide you with plenty of cells to update your BIA, but if you run out of space and you need to add new cells, Excel is going to disrupt this formula. It has to match exactly this formula that's in the formula cell. And if you see, all of the other formulas have the exact same formula in it. It's not going to be a flash fill series where it's, if it starts at B2, the next one's going to be B3, B4. No, it has to be the exact, because it's pulling off the data within your HVA categories, and your HVA categories is connected to the vulnerability likelihood score of the values that identified under your HVA. So if you add any more rows, which again, we'll give you plenty of rows, so the only thing that you should do is delete, but if you need to add another row, these will flash fill just fine, but this threat risk score has to match this formula. And if you wanted to find where that formula is without actually going to the cell, if you go to the statistical formulas, it's right here. So you can just simply copy, paste an equal sign into the cell that you created, and it will update your formula as necessary. So that completes the BIA. Once we've completed our HVA and our BIA, we can proceed to the dashboard, and the dashboard will provide you an aggregated, summarized view of your current vulnerability. So at the top, get out of these list of values, it'll identify what your current total vulnerability risk is for your facility. That includes all of the information on your BIA as well as the information on your HVA. And WG Medical Center is sitting at a current vulnerability of about 28.27%. The first table is going to identify your summary of risk for your hazards as well as continuity by your vulnerability. And this is total average of the entire table of values per worksheet. The probability of a hazard event, the probability of a continuity event, and the total facility risk for hazards as well as continuity. You'll have a summary of your HVA risk by category. So your summary of technological risks, we're at a 43% vulnerability. For natural, 41, human cause, 49, so forth and so forth. Again, these are all auto-populated based on the data that you place within your HVA and your BIA collectively. Same thing with your BIA summary of risk. Total continuity risk for output functions, 9.61. Input functions, 19.65. We didn't identify any organizational functions on the BIA, but you should, because you need organizational functions in order to establish what your EFs are. But this would populate as well, dependencies and dependencies. But all of these are still correlated and connected to the values per each one of these categories. And if you don't have set categories, it's no big deal. Many people might not, many organizations might not identify non-essential functions on their business impact analysis, but you may. And if you do, it'll populate here. A few pie charts for your HVA risk. This gives a total visualization of your current HVA risk. And if you look at each one of your categories, it'll repeat the exact same information that's up top in a more visually appealing fashion. Same thing with your continuity risk. You can see that we are highly at risk for operational organization. Well, not organizational functions a little, sorry, or zero. Your input functions, about 44% vulnerability. So you can look at this and quickly tell or quickly see what your organizational stratification looks like for your continuity as well as your hazard risk. And there are some histograms on the right side, total facility risk between your continuity and your hazards. Vulnerability, event probability, as well as your total risk vulnerability are labeled here. And then the final chart is your total facility risk by category. So total facility risk for your hazards and your continuity broken out by vulnerability as well as your total risk. This completes your dashboard, and this completes our training of our new HVA and BIA tool. We really want to thank everyone for taking the time to spend this time with us so that we can go over this. We're really excited about this tool. We've been working in this space for a while, and we've always noticed there is a better way and more room for improvement when correlating actual probability as well as what your assumptive and predictive risks are going to be for your organization. So for more information about WGPS Intermediate Emergency Management Services, please visit us at wgprepare.org. Disaster never waits. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a wonderful day.